Hello. Take it you can't hear me. Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. Is there a link or something to this that I can share on my Facebook page?
After it's posted, yeah, I think so. Yeah, not really sure how to get it to come all the way through. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to look and make sure we're coming through onto the library page. I think so. Yeah, not really sure how to get it to come all the way through. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to look and make sure we're coming through onto the library page. Okay, great. Looks like we're ready to go. Caleb, thank you so much for joining us this evening and teaching us how to start your winter garden. Wanted to welcome all of you who are attending live tonight on our Spanish Fork Library Facebook page. We're excited to have Caleb here with us, and we hope that you have a good class tonight. We're excited to have you here. So thank you, Caleb, so much. I'll let you kind of get started introducing yourself and the topic that you are addressing tonight. And as questions come along the chat feed, I'll let you know when they're asking questions. And if you wouldn't mind just answering them, I can go ahead and type in the answers as they come, or the questions as they come. So take it away, Caleb.
Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome. This is a class, I guess, about winter gardening. Is that correct?
Yes.
So I'm just going to teach you, there's several levels at which you could get involved in winter gardening if you wanted to. I suppose I've been asked to teach this class because I wrote a national best-selling book on the subject called Backyard Winter Gardening. So we'll just start. If you have any questions, I guess, I'm not sure how they'll ask questions or how I will see the questions.
Mm-hmm. I'll probably see the questions and then I can just let you know when there's a question and what it is. So.
Okay. All right, so let's get started with the easiest form of backyard winter gardening. First of all, if you want to garden in the backyard, you should know that this is how people ate through the winter, through the whole history of the world. So this is not really a new concept. Some people think that this is a concept I invented, but no. All of our ancestors did this. Ate out of their own property and out of their backyard through the winter. There are the earliest recorded example of backyard winter gardening is from Emperor Tiberius about 100 AD. He was using, and when we say he, we mean people that, you know, were doing things for him, was using slate, I'm sorry, not slate, the mineral mica, sheets of the mineral mica to build what we would call a cold frame, because he loved cucumbers and he wanted cucumbers all year long, and he was the emperor, and so I guess he could have them if he wanted them. That's the earliest recorded example that we have of someone gardening in the winter, growing something that they would not have been able to grow without some kind of special protection. From thereafter, there's lots of documentary evidence of people using different things, different methods to grow things in their backyard that they would not be able to grow without human intervention in the winter. So let me give you some examples. If you would like to experiment with backyard gardening in the winter, it's certainly not too late to get started, even though our winter is coming to an end here, maybe, although it is snowing outside right this minute. been snowing all day, at least at my house. There's about 9 inches of snow on my property right now. I live in Alpine. So anyway, one thing that you could do if you wanted to get started on what a lot of people in the backyard homesteading community are doing right now is you take a milk jug and cut the milk jug just cut it horizontally about halfway down the milk jug, and you don't need to cut it all the way off, just cut it so that you could open it, and then fill the bottom of it with some soil and get it moist and poke some holes in the bottom, and then put your seeds in it, and then go put it out in the backyard. That's one of the easiest ways to get started. And the things that you could plant in there right now you could plant almost anything right now, probably even tomatoes. And those things would just get started as the soil temperature became correct for those particular seeds. So if you wanted to get something growing in your backyard rather quickly, right now you might use that milk jug method to do peas, or to do lettuce, or to do spinach, or to do Asian grains like mizuna or mashe corn salad, or there's all kinds of grains that you can grow throughout the winter. So that's how you could start. My favorite method is to go to Deseret Industries and get any glass vase or large glass bowl. Historically, people used what they call a cloquet, a cloche, depending on how you want to pronounce it, which is a glass bell jar. And these were specially made bell jars that you could put whatever you had in your garden in the autumn that you didn't want to be killed by the cold temperatures. You would just take an individual plant and put a glass bell jar over the top of that plant. Glass bell jars today they don't make them anymore, so they're all antique, and so if you can find one, they're hundreds of dollars. They will occasionally show up though in DI and at the thrift stores because people don't know what they are. So if you see one, don't buy it. Wait, let me buy it. Just save it for me. Don't buy it for yourself. I'm just kidding. But I go and get the vases and the glass bowls, and they need to be clear glass, and just turn them upside down and in the autumn, and you can protect your plants. Like, for example, if you had lettuce or Swiss chard or spinach or something, or even peas in your garden in the autumn, you could just cover it with that, and then they would still be out there right now. If you wanted, you could use that same method right now. The only difference is that it would take a few days for the sun to warm up the soil. Let's see, if you went to DI tomorrow and you bought a large glass bowl and you went and put it upside down in some nice spot in your garden where it could get good sun, it would take a couple of days at least for the soil to warm up and the snow to melt, if you've got snow at your property, to the point where it would be safe to plant some seeds in there. And then you could open that back up and you could plant some seeds in there, and then those seeds would come up whenever the soil temperature was correct for that particular seed. So that would be an easy way to get started with backyard winter gardening that you could do right now, either the milk jug method or what I call a DI cloche. Just a $1 or $2 glass bowl or glass jar. Those are the easiest and simplest ways to get started. The next way to get started is to have an actual cold frame. A cold frame is something that you build yourself, or you could purchase, although I would not purchase a flimsy one. Normally people build those out of wood and out of plastic or glass. There is greenhouse plastic that would last a lot longer than glass. Glass does not get as warm as greenhouse plastic does. You could build a cold frame, and you could have that permanently on your property through the winter, and you would be able to grow whatever you wanted inside of that cold frame. I was visiting someone yesterday who purchased a cold frame from me, and they had a whole bed of spinach in there, and they've had it in there the whole winter. And you just pick that spinach, the big leaves, and let the little leaves continue to grow. Whatever you're growing, whether it's Swiss chard or peas or whatever it is that you're growing, you would just continue to harvest that all winter long. Instead of cutting, let's say you had a head of lettuce in there, instead of cutting the whole head of lettuce, you could, but it would be faster to take the outer leaves and let the center leaves keep growing, and then they become, and you could harvest about every 2 weeks all winter long, for example, if you were doing that with lettuce or spinach or chard or Asian greens or anything like that. So that's a more expensive method. That's a little bit of an investment method, but that's certainly an easier and a more productive, and gives you a larger space to work with if you have a cold frame in the backyard. And then after a cold frame, then you can become addicted to having what we call a solothermal geothermal Wallapini greenhouse, and then you're really on the road to growing all winter long. Are there, so those are just kind of the basic methods. I don't know if there are any questions or if people would like to talk more about certain aspects. Or...
Yeah, I do have a question just for myself. When is the best time to start planting for this? Like, is it too late right now? Because you had mentioned typically people would maybe start this in the fall, but is it possible for people to start with a seed and planting it with that jar in mind or the milk jug in mind? And then where would you put the milk jug? Is that something you put like in your window or in your house or outside, or what's recommended for that?
So yeah, milk jugs are not usually done until late January, early February. That's when you start with the milk jugs. You don't usually do the milk jug method all through the whole winter, just because there's no point, because they're not going to sprout until after the winter solstice. That's maybe kind of complicated, but anyway, winter solstice is roughly Christmas time, and I guess we could talk about winter solstice in a few minutes if we wanted to, but there's not much point in the milk jug method. You might as well, you wouldn't even start that until late January at the very earliest. And those milk jugs, once you've got them planted, you seal them back up with clear tape, and they go directly into the garden in a full sun spot outside in the garden.
Okay. So the best time then to plant the milk jugs with the plants is in that February, end of January time frame. So people could technically start that now and be just fine.
You can do the milk jug method from the end of January through April, through the end of April.
Wonderful.
And you just have to wait. It's all according to temperature. It depends on what you put in there. If you're going to put lettuce and let's say lettuce and spinach is going to germinate faster. If you had planted, I usually don't do stuff in the milk jug until about the beginning of February, because if you do it in January, you're just gonna have to wait until, I mean, it's not gonna sprout until about the beginning of February anyway. So my theory is that you might as well just wait and do it. But as it gets a little warmer, those little seedlings will pop up out of there. And I should have mentioned also that you do not have the lid on the milk jug. The lid has to be off of the milk jug.
And you trim off the top sort of it too, so you can actually put the soil in and the seeds and things, or?
You don't trim it off. We could go get one and do it right now if we wanted to. Would that be helpful if we just did a demonstration?
It might be. There's a question. Do you transfer the milk jug to the beds at 4 weeks or so, is the question?
You don't. I'm not sure what they mean by transfer. Will you read the question one more time? I mean, that stuff stays in the milk jug until it's safe for it to come out. So, for example, if you were sprouting tomato seeds in the milk jug, they would not come out of the milk jug until after Mother's Day. They would stay in the milk jug. Those plants would remain in the milk jug until after Mother's Day. If you planted tomato seeds right now, they probably wouldn't sprout for another month, even if you planted them right now. And then they would grow more slowly because they're outside, and temperature at night is getting cold, and then you wouldn't take them out until you would normally take them out. And if you wanted to plant them densely, like if you were going to do spinach or lettuce, you could plant them, you could put a whole bunch of seeds in a milk jug and plant it densely. And then when it got warmer at the end of March, early April, you could put that out into the garden, or you could plant it more lightly and you could just harvest out of those milk jugs and just have that be your mini greenhouse. Is that making any sense?
That sounds incredible. You could have it in an apartment. Yes, I have had people say that they would love to have a demo. Is that possible to do the milk demo?
Might be easier to do a demo if you don't mind me walking around.
Nope, just fine. People seem to be, you've got about 12 viewers right now, so people are interested in what you have to, your knowledge that you're sharing with us.
Well, if I had posted this on Facebook, we'd probably have 300 viewers.
I'm sure you would.
Okay, I have a milk jug here somewhere. Sorry, everyone. Maybe what? Can you also? Oh, you can't see me, can you? Okay, here's a milk jug. You can all see, by the way, can you all see my, I don't know if you can you see that?
See the washer and dryer. Oh, yes, up on the shelves there. Yes. Looks like you have sort of some, are there plants growing in under those lights there?
Yes. So we've already done probably 10,000 plants already. And we've started all kinds of, this is anise, hyssop, and echinacea, and strawberries from seed. And I've just today took a whole bunch of tomatoes out of here. There's stevia and peppers and all kinds of mulberry plants and raspberries and all kinds of rhubarb. And it's totally out of control. I admit it's totally out of control.
I don't know. It doesn't look too bad to me. Someone said, what a nice setup. That's quite a production. So you've got a good comment there.
It is a production. That's a good word for it.
Yeah.
Okay, so then here we go. We have a milk jug right here. I'm about to sacrifice this milk jug for you.
Thank you.
You'll need it's a big sacrifice, right? You'll need a razor blade knife, and you usually just start it right here. We're just going to cut a circle. So that it's not completely cut off. It just hinges open at the handle like this, okay? Then you can just poke a bunch of holes in the bottom of here. Some fairly big holes in the bottom with the razor blade knife. And then I got bags of soil here. You guys are just lucky that I'm all prepared to do this.
What soil do you use?
I prefer, for seed starting only, I use the ProMix, the organic. I only do organic. This is organic ProMix that I buy in bulk from Cook's greenhouse in Linden.
Wonderful.
Because this is a high peat moss ratio. Okay, so now we have filled this. We've got our soil in here. We can grab some seeds. Does anyone have any, does anyone live near me and they just want to come, we'll plant them something, they'd come get this.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's a cool opportunity. Because, yeah. Huh.
I'm
And you're an
Alpine.
Alpine?
If there's anyone near Alpine who wants to come pick this up, tell me right now and we'll plant what you want in it. So I have just smoothed that out. I've smoothed that soil out. I only use rainwater, which in Utah is snow melt water. And we're going to get this soil wet with water from outside. Just get it pretty moist. This soil, you want it to be pretty moist. Do you think I can make it so you guys can see this? Can you see that?
Not really. Oh, there we go. Now we can.
There we go.
That's perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
We don't have many people near Alpine, but man, if no one takes you up on that, I'd say a beefsteak tomato and I'll come get it from you.
Oh, okay. I got beefsteak tomatoes. So we're just moistening. Trying to stir some water in here, and you want to get this pretty wet, this soil, because you're not really going to water this again. You might go check on it in a month or 6 weeks. I'd probably check on it once a month. Just you don't want it to dry out once it's outside. But right now, because it's cold, it's not going to get very dry. So this soil is almost mushy because it's so wet. And then I own a seed company, so lucky for you, I have all kinds of. Let's see if we can find the beefsteak tomatoes. Here's the beefsteak tomatoes. See, beefsteak tomatoes. We're going to sprinkle those seeds on there. And then just gently stir them in. Can you guys see that? Can you see that?
Yeah, you're stirring them in. Okay.
Stir them in, and then just press this whole thing flat. Gently press like this. And then that's done. And then...
Oh, what's the name of your seed company?
seedrenaissance.com. And then you're going to close this back up. Notice that the lid is not on it. Just use clear tape. This is just regular packing tape that you can buy any old place. And you're done. Now this whole thing just goes out into the garden. Directly set it just directly outside on the snow. Just go to your regular garden spot, someplace where it's going to have some sun during the day, and just go set this whole thing right in the snow, and then forget about it for at least a month. Just, you don't even need to check on it, you don't need to look at it, you don't need to do nothing. And then as it starts to warm up, but that's because it's got tomato seeds in it. So it's going to take at least a month because it's got tomato seeds in it. If you were to put peas in this or to put lettuce or something else, then you would want to start looking for sprouts probably within about 10 to 20 days, depending on what the weather does. Is that simple or what?
Amazing. Very simple.
And you've got to have this open, otherwise if you don't leave this open, this whole thing will go moldy inside because it has to have some ventilation. So that stays open 24 hours a day. And this tape, if you just look in here, and if it's got something big enough in there that you want to harvest it, then you just open this tape up and take the, let's say there's spinach in here, you want to take the big leaves of the spinach out and then tape it back up and then just set it right back in the garden spot, and just that's how you do it.
Amazing.
Okay, what else?
Let's see, you spoke about the jar. Do you want to show us what that jar looks like?
Sure. I could run out and get one. I'd have to leave you here unattended for a moment.
That's okay. Let's see. Are there any questions from people who are watching right now? Does the jug affect the daylight requirements?
Well, the jug is translucent, so that's why it can act as a greenhouse. So the daylight, I mean, it gets plenty of daylight in there just because it's a translucent jug.
Okay. Are there any seeds for spring that you don't plant in the milk jug?
You could probably plant whatever you wanted. I mean, I have lots of people do this method. I did not invent this method. There are thousands and thousands of people probably hundreds of thousands of people who do this every year. And they do flowers and vegetables and culinary herbs and medicinal herbs. And usually they put one kind of thing in one jug. I have friends who do hundreds of these jugs. One of these days at my house, we're just going to do a class, because I've got a whole bunch of these jugs. We're going to just do this at my house one of these soon days. We were going to do it this week, but then it just snowed. So we're not going to do it because I don't know when the snow is going to melt again. But they usually just put one thing in the jug, and then you have a whole bunch of jugs, and one of them will have spinach in it, and one of them will have something else in it, and one of them will have beets in it, and one will have lettuce in it, and one will have tomatoes in it, and one will have oregano in it, and it's just, you know, whatever you want to plant.
Would the jug work well for an outdoor winter herb garden? That's a question.
No, you can only do this starting at the end of January through April. So if you want to have an herb garden, there are some things that you can do. I mean, if you've got, these are just all of the, none of these are all lights. Here, I'll tell you a little secret. These are all lights I got for free off of KSL Classifieds. These are all just regular, like, you can buy one of these lights with the bulbs for $20 at any hardware store. They're not special grow lights. There's nothing special about any of these lights. So if you want like a indoor herb garden, you can just get a light and put it up. If you don't want to put a light up, then there are some herbs that you don't even need a light, like if you wanted to do mint or something like that. If you had a really sunny window, you could do basil or maybe even some lettuce or something like that, if you want to do it indoors.
Okay. So the outdoor winter herb garden, the jug method perhaps isn't the best way. It would just be better to just plant the herbs in the spring then?
Well, because that jug will freeze solid. And so you can't really plant a jug like that outside. I mean, even now, if you put it out there, it's going to freeze solid during the night and unthaw during the day. So only cold tolerant things are going to sprout in it right now. And if you tried to leave a living plant in that jug the whole winter, it would die. Because starting in December, it's going to be, first of all, because of the whole winter solstice issue, it's going to die anyway, just because of the winter solstice. But then it's going to be too frozen in there. If you wanted to keep herbs alive through the winter in the garden, you would need to use a glass cloche, like a glass bowl that you got from DI or a glass vase. You get the thickest bowl or vase that you can find, and you put one over, like if you had a thyme plant, you put one cloche over that individual thyme plant, or one Swiss chard plant, or onions, or whatever it is, green onions, whatever it is that you wanted to have out there. Kale, collard greens, spinach, lettuce.
Great. So even though the ground will freeze, the bowl will preserve that somehow, the plant.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when you have the glass over there is that the sun is captured in there during the day. It heats up that soil, and that soil releases the heat during the night back into the inside of the glass jar. That heat can't escape, and so there's a reciprocal exchange of heat back and forth according to the day and night, and that usually will keep the soil from freezing solid, or even if it does freeze, keep it so it's not frozen so badly that it kills the root.
The bulbs aren't daylight bulbs? That's a question.
What bulbs are we talking about?
Not sure. Maybe if that was the question, maybe if they can expound on that a little bit more.
I'm not.
Behind you. It's behind you. The bulbs aren't daylight bulbs. I guess there's bulbs behind you.
Yeah.
Bulbs, light bulbs. Very good. Very
Light bulbs.
Sorry.
I was like, are we talking
We're
about
getting
bulbs? I had no idea what we were talking about.
Yeah,
no, these are they're hardware store light bulbs. They're the cheapest fixtures and light bulbs you can get. I mean, you can go into any hardware store right now. These are all 4 foot long. You can sometimes get them smaller, but these are the cheapest ones, and they're not special. They're not full spectrum bulbs. The Extension Service did a study on this, an extensive study on it, and the cheap fluorescent bulbs produce just as nicely as the full spectrum light bulbs. I've done this for years, as you can see. So no, you don't need anything expensive if you're going to do this in the house.
wonderful.
But I just start this, and this is all just for starting, and then all of this stuff just gets moved out into my greenhouses, because I have Wallapini. I have 8 Wallapini geothermal greenhouses, so this stuff doesn't stay in here. But you could, if you wanted to have a garden. You just need to be able to, you can see that these are on chains. I don't know if you can see that these are on chains. Can you see that?
A little bit. You might, oh, there we go. That's helpful. Okay.
So that,
Yeah,
because as things grow, you're going to have to be able to move those lights up and down. So right now, these strawberries are just little babies, but none of this stuff. I mean, the tomatoes that I took out of here today were 12 inches tall. And they've got to, once they're 12 inches tall, they got to go out to the greenhouse. They're too big to be in here. So.
And were these planted? I'm just curious. If you guys have other questions, those who are viewing this, feel free to send them through the chat. In the meantime, I'm going to ask a question about if your plant grows tall and the ground isn't quite ready to plant the plant into, what would be the next step for someone, that in-between step before they could actually get it into the ground?
Are you talking about using the Milk Jug Method?
Yeah, if it happens to grow, bigger.
They stay in the milk jug and they just get crowded.
Okay, and will that kill the plant, or?
Just make sure they don't dry out. When it starts to get into April time, then they can get hot in there pretty quickly, and you just have to make sure that they don't dry out. You might just put, like right now, I've got this sitting in a tray. You could just bottom water, because this has got to have drain holes in it. But you could, if it's too late in the spring and it's starting to get hot, you could bottom water this just so that it doesn't ever dry out.
And then then sometime after Mother's Day is recommended. So in May, maybe that second week or so is recommended
Well,
to put
you
them in the soil.
have to keep an eye on the weather. You can't just don't in Utah, don't just rely on Mother's Day. You've got some years you can plant 2 weeks, 3 weeks before Mother's Day, and some years you have to wait till after Mother's Day. You have to look at the weather forecast.
Okay. So what size of plant do you need it to be so it's sort of hardy enough, so to speak, so that it can resist if there was a light snow or a light dusting, that the ground doesn't freeze type thing?
Well, it depends on what the plant is. If it's a tomato plant, it's not going to resist the light
Okay.
dusting. It'll just, if it's out in the ground without a cover over it, then it's going to die. So you don't want to take it out of the jug unless you're absolutely sure that you have no more frost coming for the year. If it is, any time after probably March 15th, after about the third week of March, you could put lettuces and spinaches and peas and all of that stuff just directly outside. You can cut this, if you're concerned about it, once you have planted what's growing in here, you can cut this the rest of the way off and just shove it over that for a week or two to cover it some more once you've planted it directly in the garden, if you're concerned about that.
Okay.
Just so it has a little protection. Or you could go to DI and get yourself a collection of glass bowls and vases and just use those.
That's such a great idea. So just 8 greenhouses? It's a hobby then,
Yeah.
One of the comments. Just want to pass it along.
Just 8.
All right. Here's another 2 questions for you. I've heard of straw bale gardening for potatoes, etc. Is starting something in straw bales okay for encouraging early season growth? Does it provide cover and heat? So those are the 2 questions for you.
Strawbell gardening is really great if you live in Maine. If you live in Utah, then strawbell gardening is a disaster. Don't do it. When you do strawbell gardening, you just take a bale of straw and you plant directly. Usually you transplant directly right into the bale of straw. The problem is that you have to keep that bale of straw soaked. That works really well in places with humidity and rain, which we don't have either one of those in Utah. So that does not work in Utah.
Okay.
Don't do it.
Okay.
Or if you do it, be honest about it on social media. What really drives me crazy is because I've seen this a lot on social media. People will go get their straw bale and then they'll go to the nursery and they'll get their plants and they'll wet their straw bale and then they take pictures and it's a lovely planted straw bale and then they take pictures of it and put it on Facebook and show everyone their beautiful strawbell garden in Utah, and then they don't show us the pictures of what it looks like a week later when it's dead.
Okay. The person that was asking the question said thanks. So appreciate the honest response on that. That's very helpful.
Well, I learned that the hard way. I tried it, but it's impossible to keep that straw wet enough to grow.
Let's see. It looks like someone had mentioned they like to plant in the ground later and then, in the season, and then mulch with straw. So.
Absolutely. Mulch with straw, or go to Chip Drop and get some wood chips, or that's always a good idea. The problem with mulching with straw is that 10 years ago straw was cheap. Now people have caught on and the farmers are selling the straw bales for more than the hay bales. So straw mulching has become expensive over the last 10 years, but the wood chips are cheap, so you can use wood chips. Oh,
great suggestion. So perhaps those who are watching perhaps an idea could be using wood chips if you want to use something that's a little less expensive then. That's great. Okay. Looks like someone uses insulation around their raised garden box.
Yep. that's to help keep the raised garden box from freezing solid, because the raised garden box will freeze solid in the dead of winter. We're probably about, because we're past Valentine's Day now, we're probably past the point where that would be necessary.
Does dirt in raised beds stay warmer than in the ground?
It stays colder than in the ground. Raised beds are always colder because they are exposed on more planes. Like, they lose heat this way and this way. Not, the ground only loses heat horizontally, but a raised bed loses heat vertically and horizontally. So raised beds are always colder and always require more water because they drain faster as well. That's a good question.
Yeah. Just watching the chat to see if there's any more questions.
Well, let's discuss really quickly what would be a good idea to plant right now, today, tomorrow. Like, everybody can probably get a hold of some milk jugs, and if you don't have any milk jugs, then just holler out to your neighbors and your friends, and pretty soon you'll probably have more milk jugs than you know what to do with. And right now, it would be a good idea if I were just starting like tomorrow to plant some milk jugs, I would plant peas in the milk jug, and I would probably, if it were me, I would plant probably 8 plants of peas in one milk jug, because in about 4 weeks or 5 weeks, you could just divide those and plant them directly out into the open garden. So you would use one milk jug to start yourself 8 different pea plants. Does that make sense?
Does it have a variety of pea or?
Cascadia pea is the most cold hardy pea. That's right here. This is the Cascadia pea. I don't know. That's the pea that will do the best, but you can do any kind of pea. They will just be a little slower. If they're not Cascadia peas, they might not be quite as cold hardy, and they might not germinate as fast as the Cascadia peas do. So if you've got some pea seeds on hand, just try them. And if you don't have pea seeds on hand, I know this really handsome and humble guy who owns a seed company who has Cascadia seeds. And then also, yeah. Also, you could do spinach right now. If you're interested in greens, you could do spinach. You could do almost any lettuce right now. You could do, I don't think I would do my root vegetables yet, although I would start onions. If you start onions from seeds, which everyone should, because that's the cheapest way to do onions, I would put those out right now in a milk jug and let them get started. You could start asparagus right now. You could start onions right now. Other than that, I probably would wait a couple of weeks to do root things, but I would do more leafy things right now.
Okay, and you had mentioned chard, spinach, lettuce. That's some too, perhaps, or?
Yes, Swiss chard. Yes, it'll be very happy. Do 8 to 10 Swiss chard plants in one milk jug, and then just like the peas, in 4 or 5 weeks, just transplant them. Take them out individually, cut them out individually, plant them directly in the ground in 4 or 5 weeks, depending on what in Utah, you just never know. In 3 weeks, it might be early summer. In 3 weeks, it might be 2 feet of snow. So you just have to kind of watch what's going on. But
ideally, though, not to plant in the ground until it's thawed and you're
correct.
Pretty confident that it's going to be,
If you can look at the 10-day forecasts, and the soil is completely thawed out, and you can look at the 10-day forecast, and it looks fairly, how reliable that 10-day forecast is. But you just look at the 10-day forecast and see if maybe it looks like it's going to stay that way. Then go ahead, at some point in March, about March 15th, and just start planting because your peas and stuff will be by that time they'll probably be 6 to 8 inches tall, each pea plant. The chard will probably be 6 inches tall. And you're a whole month ahead of everyone else who's just out there starting, you know, from seed at that point. You've got a garden ready to harvest in 6 weeks.
Fantastic. 2 more questions for you, and unless there are any more, we'll probably wrap up. The Farmer's Almanac said for the next week, broccoli, cauliflower, bell peppers to start inside as seeds. Would that be good in the jugs?
Broccoli, all of the brassicas you could do in jugs right now. That's absolutely true. Peppers, I prefer to start my peppers in here under the lights and then take them out and put them in the greenhouse. If you don't have a greenhouse, I would wait and do your peppers probably in 2 or 3 weeks. But the cabbage and the cauliflower, the kohlrabi, the kale, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, all of those brassica family things could go directly into the jug right now and should go into the jug right now. That's a very good point.
Are there veggies you grow that require cold stratification that would benefit from winter sowing?
Not necessarily some veggies, but mostly culinary and medicinal herbs. I do cold stratification for some rare medicinal herbs and culinary herbs and some rare plant. I mean, I probably right now outside directly in my outside garden, I probably have 20,000 seeds cold stratifying in dozens and dozens of large growing trays that are under the snow right now. But those are mostly rare medicinal herbs and things like that that most people probably wouldn't know what to do with.
So I guess, so can you, it says, are there veggies you grow that require cold stratification?
Lovage benefits from some cold stratification, although you can plant it from seed. We're just getting ready to do peaches from seeds. I'm cold stratifying my I'm trying to think of specifically vegetables that we're cold stratifying. Some lomatium, that's a, you know, I consider that a vegetable, but that's biscuit root, what the Indians used to call biscuit root. That has to be cold stratified. I've got 2 species of lomatium out there right now cold stratifying. Balloon flower has edible roots, that's out there cold stratifying. The mulberries are out cold stratifying. The mulberry seeds are out there cold stratifying. Strawberry seeds would not necessarily hate being cold stratified. Spinach is okay being cold stratified. I would do it directly in the ground, however. You don't have to, but spinach comes up really nicely on its own in the spring if you sow it in the fall directly.
Yes.
I can't think of any normal vegetables that require cold stratification, what people would consider normal vegetables. There's not really any of those that would require cold stratification. Celery sprouts better if it has some cold stratification. But all of those things, you can sprout them without cold stratification. It just takes longer.
Are there, it says interested in herbs too, ones from your store, in regards to, I believe, the question about cold stratification. I don't know. I think that's how that comment ties into the question. Does that sound like kind of you've already addressed it perhaps? Or
well, there's you know, the culinary herbs, I divide herbs into culinary herbs and medicinal herbs because I'm an herbalist. So in my world, there's culinary herbs and medicinal herbs, and the culinary herbs are probably what most of your people are thinking of, and those are the ones that you would want to do right now are the perennial ones. So if you were going to do oregano, you would put that out right now in the milk jug, or you could take oregano seed, believe it or not, and just go throw it directly on the snow right now, and that would help it to come up. Marjoram would be the same. like anise hyssop or anything in the mint family, you could just either do in the milk jugs right now or just throw out there directly. You could do common sage or any of the sage species out there right now. You could do the thyme plants out there right now in a jug, or if you throw them directly on the snow, they're not going to come up until late April. But if you do them in the jug, then they're going to come up in the next 4 weeks. I would not. You could do parsley right now. Parsley does benefit from cold soil, not necessarily cold stratification, but it definitely likes to germinate in cold soil like the onions do. They like to germinate in the cold soil. If you get the onions or the celery or the stuff like that, the parsley, in too warm of soil, they don't germinate very well. Lovage you would do also right now. I'm trying to think if there's anything else.
Question for you. Can we grow blueberries here?
Only if you love babysitting. You can grow blueberries if you love to babysit, because blueberries have to have acidic soil, which means that you have to keep them acidified. Remember that all of our water is alkaline in Utah, and all of our soil is alkaline in Utah, and all of our air is alkaline in Utah because we have so much dust in our air. So it is hard to get blueberry. It's not hard to keep a blueberry plant alive, but it is really hard to keep a blueberry plant acidified enough that it will actually produce blueberries. But you can do it if you're willing to really babysit it and check its pH twice a week and make sure that you're keeping that pH on the low acid side. But most people give up and think it's much easier to go to Costco and buy blueberries.
That's interesting to know. I had no idea. Okay.
Utah's not super hospitable. Any plant that is an acid-loving plant, like a hydrangea or a blueberry or a huckleberry or wintergreen, plants like that love the acid soil, they're not really welcomed in Utah. Utah's not very, we're just so alkaline.
Well,
everything's alkaline.
Too bad, because those are really good fruits right there, those berries. Thank you for responding to that question. That's perfect. All right. Well,
I hope everyone will get started. Don't just, the thing to do now that you've learned the Milk Jug Method or the DI cloche method is to go do it. So make a goal. If you've been listening, make a goal, get yourself some seeds, save your milk jugs. I save every milk jug in this house all year long. I have hundreds of milk jugs right now out in my barn, all strung up on ropes, because this is the time. We're getting to that time where all of a sudden you want these things. So just do it. Even if you just do one, do it. Go get started. Have fun. You know what? It's hard to be depressed if you have a little greenhouse in your backyard with baby peas in it. And I think that a lot of people, that's been really hard on people, this whole pandemic, and having your hands in the soil and eating something that you grew yourself in your own backyard, it's a real great way to cheer yourself up and to feel better.
I love that you mentioned that, because that's why I was hoping you could do a class for us, to our patrons here at the library and anyone else who happened to join us. Because of that very thing. It's the isolation, depression numbers have risen exponentially, and you're right, having something living and growing during this time offers a sense of accomplishment and reward and excitement.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's an excellent point. I appreciate you mentioning that. One of the comments is, I've seen the Milk Jug Method before, but never loved it. She says, but now I'm inspired and we'll start tomorrow. So,
yes, that's all we want. We just want you to try it. And here's what's going to happen. I'll be really honest with you. You try the Milk Jug Method, and then you move to the DI cloche method, and then you move to the cold frame method, and then you'll be calling me to build you a greenhouse. It's very addictive. This whole thing's very addictive. It's too much fun.
What a wonderful hobby, though, right?
Yes, it is.
That's so wonderful. Well, if there are no more questions, Caleb, thank you so, so much for coming and being willing to take of your share of your time and your knowledge.
Well,
Um,
I hope everyone will tell you thank you, because you spent a lot of time over the past 2 months, and I was not always easy to get a hold of, and so you deserve a big round of applause for putting all of this together. You worked hard.
Oh, well, it was my pleasure to do that. So
Thanks
I'm
for
glad it
having
worked
me.
out. Yes. There's several comments just saying I'm starting from seeds for the first time. Thanks for giving me confidence.
Oh, good.
Another one is saying thank you. Lots of thank yous and you know, thumbs up. So wonderful. Caleb, thank you so much.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you. You
Bye-bye.
as well. Goodbye.